Russian summer offensive starts with a column pushing hard through open ground. Crews look pretty convinced that they have momentum. Then one vehicle slows, a single pause, and the entire formation begins to break rhythm. Ukrainian drones are already watching. They're waiting for that exact second. From here on, nothing goes the way the column expects, because this is where the true fight begins. It appears on a quiet stretch of tree line, a shape that doesn't belong. Operators stare at the feed for a few seconds before the confirmation comes in. One of the North Korean 240mm rocket systems Russia began using last year. It's the kind of system that stays far behind the fight, firing from distances where most drones can't reach it. However, the drone watching it isn't the usual kind. It's a long-range FPV, slow, steady, and already deep behind the front. The operator waits for the cabin door to line up. When the strike lands, there's no dramatic flash. Fire builds inside the launcher, creeping toward the stored rockets. A few minutes later, the system is no longer usable, and that one loss begins to ripple across the grid it was supporting. The assault begins with confidence. A Russian column rolls out in a tight formation, tanks in front and BMPs behind them. Those push toward Ukrainian positions with surreal momentum. The lead tank doesn't spot the mines. It hits the first one hard enough to shake the vehicles behind it. The entire line hesitates for a moment. And then, instead of reassessing, the column keeps moving straight into the same field, as if speed will erase the danger. The second tank triggers another blast. The third vehicle slows, loses its track, and stops entirely. Whatever plan the crews were following is gone by now. It's replaced by confusion in the dust and smoke ahead of them. When the dust settles, one BMP stays on the field longer than it should. The crew has already stepped out and moved on, leaving a vehicle packed with ammunition and barely covered by the tree line. It doesn't take long for Ukrainian operators to spot it. The outline is too clean, and the hatches sit a little too open. It's the kind of target you don't rush, because one precise angle is worth more than a fast approach. A fiber optic drone is sent in. Slow, controlled, unaffected by jamming. It moves under branches, through shadows, and along the side of the hull until the open point comes into view. The operator doesn't force the moment. He waits, steadies the feed, and guides the drone inside. A fire starts almost immediately. Nothing dramatic at first, just heat spreading through a vehicle loaded with more ammunition than it can handle. A few minutes later, the BMP is gone from the fight, and the column that left it behind has one less vehicle to rely on. By the time the column realizes the route is finished, 3 tanks are out of the fight, 1 armored vehicle has been left behind, and only a single BMP manages to reverse out of the catastrophe they just drove into. The next BMP isn't sitting in the open. It's tucked behind a low rise, with its jamming system already running, the kind of setup meant to push drones off course before they get anywhere near it. But the operators watching it know the routine. Strong jamming usually means the crew left in a hurry or expects trouble. The first drone loses signal before it reaches the hull. The second drops lower, weaving through interference until the picture stabilizes for a moment. That's all the operator needs. A pause in the static and a clean line toward the hatch that the crew forgot to seal. The drone slips inside. The vehicle shakes once, not from an explosion, but from a sudden loss of control. Within seconds, the BMP stops responding to its systems. A fire begins to grow behind the armor, slow at first, then bright enough to show through the openings. Another vehicle is removed from the field, not by force, but by patience and timing. The first artillery piece is easy to miss. It sits halfway under a tree line, engine still warm, crew moving fast after finishing a fire mission. A Ukrainian reconnaissance drone stays above it. It holds distance and waits for the moment when the coordinates can be passed on without alerting the crew below. When the number set is confirmed, the call goes through. A HIMARS team miles away receives the grid and fires before the crew can reposition. The strike lands close enough to take the gun out of action on the spot. But this isn't the end of the sequence. Another artillery system tries to hide behind a row of trees, hoping to blend in with the terrain. The drone sees it, and the grid goes out. A second guided rocket arrives with the same accuracy, and the position falls quiet again. The remaining crews try to pull their guns deeper into cover, but the recon feed doesn't lose them. Each attempt to move leaves a trail, heat, dust, and a shadow that shouldn't be there. Then, one by one, the artillery line begins to thin out. The next push comes fast. APCs and the newest BMP variants move in a tight cluster, their electronic warfare units switched on from the first meter. The goal is to reach the line, drop infantry, and pull back before drones can find them. But unfortunately, the field doesn't cooperate. The first vehicle takes a hit from an FPV that slips in under the jamming blanket. It loses movement almost instantly. The second vehicle keeps going until it runs over a mine buried just deep enough to stay hidden. Tracks grind, the engine coughs, and the whole formation hesitates. Crews start leaving their vehicles and running toward the nearest cover. The immobilized machines stay behind. And then the drones return, one after another, striking the vehicles that can't shift out of the kill zone. By the end of the sequence, the entire armored group, including 3 APCs and 2 of the newest BMPs, is out of the fight. Those were stopped not by one strike, but by a chain of small moments, stacking up faster than the crews can respond. A T-80 moves in from the tree line, only to reach a firing point and hit Ukrainian positions before they can shift. It keeps a steady pace, cutting across uneven ground and trusting its speed and armor to buy the crew a few seconds of advantage. They don't get those seconds. An FPV drone is already in the air, following the tank's heat trail from a distance. The operator waits until the T-80 turns, exposing the rear plate for a moment. That's all he needs. The drone drops lower, lines up the engine deck, and makes the strike. The tank loses movement almost at once. The crew climbs out, leaving the vehicle behind as smoke builds inside the compartment. A second drone arrives to finish the job, settling into the open point the first hit exposed. By the time the fire settled, the T-80 never fired a single round. Another armored group appears on the move. A PCS march up front with infantry packed inside. All are heading toward a set of Ukrainian positions they expect to overrun quickly. The plan is to close the distance, unload the troops, and pull the vehicles back before drones lock on. However, the field turns against them almost immediately. The first APC takes a hit from the rear. It doesn't explode, it just stops, suddenly and completely, the way a machine does when something essential breaks before anyone understands what happened. The second vehicle tries to push through, builds speed, and reaches the mine that was waiting for it. Both crews step out and run for cover. The vehicles stay where they fell, exposed and still, easy for drones to track. Ukrainian operators send another FPV toward the APC that didn't make it far enough. The drone slips into the open point, hits what it needs to hit, and leaves the machine burning from the inside. The next drone finishes the second vehicle in the same slow, methodical way. By the time the smoke settles, the entire push is stalled, and the ground they hoped to cross becomes another place they have to abandon. A Russian Pantsir sits deep inside the occupied territory. It's positioned the way air defense crews prefer: distance, cover, and enough warning time to react to anything incoming. For a while, it looks secure. Nothing moves around it except the dust settling from earlier launches. Then a Ukrainian heavy drone enters the frame. It's slow, steady, and flying far beyond the range most operators are comfortable with. The Pantsir wakes up the moment it detects movement. Missiles launch quickly, cutting trails across the sky, but the drone keeps its line. Each shot misses by a margin that feels too close, but close doesn't change the outcome. The operator holds the target in view the entire time. When the strike lands, the crew can't do anything. The Pantsir stops moving, and the site that was supposed to guard the area goes silent. It looks like an abandoned building at first glance, with broken windows, dust, and absolutely no movement around the entrance. A Ukrainian drone circles it the way operators do when something feels off. They give it time, watching the shadows inside each room and waiting for a sign that the place isn't as empty as it looks. And then it happens. A figure moves near the doorway. Another appears behind a wall. The building isn't abandoned at all. It's an active command point hidden inside the ruins. The coordinates go up the chain. Minutes later, an F-16 lines up a guided bomb from far beyond the front, the kind of strike meant for a target that matters. The pilot releases at a distance, and the hit lands clean. The building collapses in on itself, and the command center that blended into the landscape is gone from the fight. A damaged Russian vehicle sits in an open field with its front plate caved in and the engine barely holding together. A recovery team arrives with specialized equipment. They try to pull it out before Ukrainian drones notice the commotion. It almost works for a moment. The cables tighten, the vehicle shifts, and the crew prepares to move it to safer ground. But the drones are already watching. A switchblade loiters high above the scene, circling without drawing attention. When the operator commits, the drone drops fast and lines up the cabin. The hit is precise, and the recovery effort ends on the spot. The vehicle stops moving, and the team abandons the site before a second strike arrives. Nearby, another artillery unit tries to reposition, but it doesn't get far. A second guided drone enters the frame, adjusts once, and makes contact. 2 systems gone in the span of a few minutes. Both were caught during the only moment they were vulnerable while trying to escape. AMIG-29 flies far from the front line, holding altitude and waiting for the final coordinates. The target is a command site tucked deep behind Russian lines, one of the few places where their planners still feel protected by distance. That distance doesn't help today. The pilot receives the grid, arms an AASM-type guided bomb, and releases it without ever approaching the target himself. The weapon travels the rest of the way, adjusting mid-course, carrying the kind of accuracy that removes any need for a close pass. The drone, watching from above, sees the moment it arrives. The structure collapses in sections, and the site that anchored the area's operations goes offline in seconds. One strike, launched from dozens of miles away, shifts the entire layout of the battlefield beneath it. 152mm artillery unit finishes a fire mission and starts shifting toward a tree line, trying to disappear before drones circle back. It doesn't move fast enough. A long-range FPV locks onto the barrel. One precise hit is all it needs. A breach in the metal means the next shot can't be trusted, and a gun that can't fire safely is a gun already out of the fight. The crew steps away, leaving the system behind. Farther down the line, Russian electronic warfare vehicles try to cover the gap. Their antennas are active. They're pushing interference across the field, the kind meant to scatter drone signals before they reach anything important. But jamming only helps if the drones stay at a distance. These don't. Operators guide them low, under the worst of the interference, inching close enough to reach the exposed sections around the equipment. A clean strike lands on the first unit. Another follows its partner a few minutes later. By the end of the sequence, the artillery piece is silent, the EW systems are disabled, and the ground they were meant to protect is suddenly open. The footage ends the same way many of these moments do. Each strike, each stalled advance, and each lost position changes the shape of the field long before anyone announces it. If you follow how these changes play out and want to stay with the story as it moves, subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments what stayed with you the most from these moments. The decisions, the timing, or how fast everything turned.